Hello and welcome to Aspects of Writing. My name is James Kelly. I am the host of Aspects of Writing. My co-host is Janet Corsi. Our guests for today's show are Kim Barron and Jay Joseph. And this is an impromptu meeting. We're actually in an event in Las Vegas, and we're set up at the Alexis Park Hotel. They've been very gracious in letting us use their boardroom here. And if you don't know anything about Alexis Park, just go to aspectsofwriting.com, and we have a little ad there for you that you can just click on and learn more about Alexis Park and their all-suite hotel. I'm going to talk to Kim here first. Kim, I want to know a little bit about you. Give us a little bit about your background. And we're actually going to be talking about script writing today. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what led up to all this?
Thank you so much, James. I am a journalism. I have a journalism degree.
Okay.
It was a very reluctant degree. I always shied away from it, and I never thought that I could write.
Okay.
And so I had a big fear about writing.
Uh-huh.
And to a point where this is terrible, but I would sometimes hire people to do my papers because I seriously,
oh my goodness.
in school, because I would have this huge fear.
Uh-huh.
So that was in the first 2 years.
Okay.
Then I left school and traveled around the United States a bit.
Okay.
I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
All right.
And traveled around and originally was going to go back to school right when I left Milwaukee, but it didn't happen, and I didn't go back for another probably 10 years.
Oh, okay.
So I was an adult when I went back to school, and all of a sudden I found myself declaring journalism as my major. I have no idea why. I still, to this day, have no clue how that happened.
So you've not utilized it much.
But I have since I've graduated, but
Okay.
going into it and saying, they're saying, what do you want to declare your major as? I said, journalism. And I was like, where did that come from? Because I can't do that. I have a fear of writing. But I learned, but what I learned about that, but what I loved about it is that writing for journalism and for broadcast and for newspapers is very different than writing for your college papers, right? And so that was the only experience I had. So it was more crisp and concise. So I got really good training during my degree. And so then I was an editor for the college newspaper.
Okay.
And loved it, absolutely loved it. And that's where I developed that I figured out that I was really good at editing.
Okay.
So then it evolved into just writing people would send me things and say, hey, can you take a look at this? Because I had a reputation just within my circle of friends or whatever for editing. Yeah. But then I became a lover of writing. I journal. All of a sudden I've become a writer. And
so now the
in
journalistic part didn't go to waste.
Correct.
Right, yeah.
Yes. So then my sister one night or one morning woke up and she called me and she's like, I had a dream that I don't think was a dream, and I have an entire movie that came to me last night.
I believe
But I need you to write it because I don't know how to do that. And I need you as partner. So the two of us have collaborated. And she told me the whole thing. I wrote it all out. And I would have questions. I'll say, okay, but what about this? What about this? And she said, okay, let me go back to sleep and then I'll let you know. So she'd go to sleep that night, ask the question right before she went to sleep, would wake up and have the answer for me. So that's what we're doing right now. I'm writing a screenplay.
Okay. And it's interesting because you are associated with Maureen St. Germain.
That is correct.
Who was on our show.
Yes.
Just prior to you guys coming in.
Correct.
And we actually talked about how important that dream state is and listening to it. So hopefully your sister will do more of that,
Yes.
Yeah. But I also want to. We're going to talk about screenwriting. I do want to introduce both of you, and then we're going to get into this. So, Jay, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm from Los Angeles originally.
Okay.
Born and raised, and in school I started writing on the newspaper.
Okay.
And so I followed my journalism and English major into college. And I had the opportunity of interviewing Carol Burnett years back on her stage on CBS, and that was very exciting. From there, I'm also a performer, so I've been in theater since I was a kid, also in high school. And then I began writing. I had an agent in Los Angeles who wanted to do something different for a party, so I said, I'll write a murder mystery. And so I've been writing interactive murder mysteries since 1985. And it's a little bit different than a screenplay in that even though there's a full story involved and all of the scenes are written, everything is played out through improvisation. So a lot of the scripting came from us doing improvisation, or the scenes would grow from what I scripted into improvisation. And then I also had the opportunity to write these as scripts because we were going to start offering them through a publishing house.
Wow.
So it's been really interesting.
Give us an idea of some of the stories.
I've got a story called Death by Chocolate.
Okay.
And that one is set about the first international chocolate cuisine taste test in the 1940s.
Okay.
We have one called Lethal Libations, which is about a winery and a cad by the name of Irwin Gillespie, who's a womanizing cad who has diabetes. And
few twists there.
just a few twists. We have a show called All's Fair in Love and Music because I also write musicals as well.
Oh, wow.
So we have songs that are woven throughout. And the greatest thing about these shows is that they take on a life of their own after so many incarnations. We had, for 2 years, 7 of our stories were set on Royal Caribbean for the guests.
Oh, good.
So we had many different stories set in the 1920s to current day. And we have a story that we're doing at Lowry's Prime Rib coming up soon for Halloween, which is called Mystery at the Earthquake Saloon, set in the 1880s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of different storylines, a lot of different feels for them, and as I said, they kind of take on a life of their own because it's different with each audience.
When you were starting out, let's say you're in high school.
Yes.
Did you ever think you were ever going to be a writer?
Never.
Never?
No, I was always going to be a performer.
Okay. All right. And we know you had never thought about really being a writer.
Not
you were
at
afraid
all.
of writing.
Not at all. Yeah,
That's taking a phobia and making something out of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So what I want to talk about here is, first of all, I want to get a take on because you had how did you learn to write scripts? Where did you go to learn to write scripts?
Well, that in and of itself is, the internet is a real savior at this day and age. So we did look a lot of. There are some programs and some things that you can actually use to help you.
What program did you use to write the script?
I knew you were going to ask that. I'll think of it. And
Well,
then
let me ask you this.
know.
Did you go out and purchase one, or did you get one
No,
off
we
the internet?
purchased one.
You did go purchase one.
We
So there's
purchased
Final
one.
Draft.
Yeah.
There's
It's
Mo-
Final Draft.
Okay.
It's Final Draft.
Which
Thank
is the
you.
number one.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's Final
Okay.
Draft.
All right.
And that was recommended by someone that we actually are consulting with, who is a seasoned script writer. And he's done quite a few. And what's great about him is that he's allowing us to maintain all of the creative control over the
voice.
entire project.
Yeah.
And he's just offering in the form a lot of the time of question, so, well, what about this? What would you think about this?
Right.
Not without, he's making suggestions as opposed to saying, well, I think it should be like this.
Right.
So it gets us thinking,
Right.
and it gets us to, most of the time what we don't answer him right on the dime. We just say, okay, well, we'll get back to you. And then my sister Pam and I will discuss the process and say, okay, well, what do you think? Do you think she should be like this, or do you think she should be like this? Because one of our characters took almost a complete 180 from what we had started with. And actually, a couple of them did, because it's that evolution.
And that's what you need to do.
You definitely do. The first time we showed it to someone, our first draft,
Right.
basically,
Yeah.
someone said, "Oh, it sounds like a Murder, She Wrote episode."
Yep.
It was too syrupy. They're like, there isn't enough conflict.
Okay.
You know, you need a little bit of conflict to keep the people engaged.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, I guess, you know, we're like, but there's too much conflict in the world, you know, and, but, you know, in hindsight, I think we made some really good progress and adjustments.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the script doctor, I call them script doctors. How did you find him?
He is a friend of a friend.
Okay.
So a really good family friend, Ingrid, is really good friends with his mother.
Okay.
And so she introduced us.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, he's really
and
great.
he's done scripts, you said, that have been out there on the market? Or?
Yes, he has.
Okay.
And he writes for people.
Okay.
So directors and producers, you know, they'll come to him with projects.
Okay.
And just say, you know, I have this project. Can you put it into script form or, you know, screenplay form?
Okay.
And so he'll do that.
All right. And I'm going to ask you the same thing, Jay. What software do you use?
I don't.
you don't?
I just do it. The way that I write is I come up with the characters first. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I do is a little bit backward. I have a concept of the show in my head or the story in my head. I write the characters first. As I'm writing the characters, the storyline comes through. Mm-hmm. And then I go into, so I go the back door. Yeah.
But you had mentioned that you actually have put your work out there for reproduction to sell.
Yes.
And you had to put it in a format.
Right. And so what I did is I basically followed from being in theater. I followed scripts that I had seen and that I have done. And so I followed those formats in writing, in putting the mystery into that
But
format.
you physically put it in that format.
Yes.
Oh, do you realize how much time that is?
Yes, I do.
I mean, the wonderful thing
I didn't know.
is,
I know a final draft, but I did not know that would have helped me to have done. So.
I'll think of it in a minute. I'll give you one you can get for like $49 off of the internet. It's really fantastic. It actually converts Final Draft and and a couple of the others into its format. Wow. So, but I'll tell you that.
Thank you.
But anyway, and that's important because it can speed up your process as writing. And you're using Final Draft, so you already know.
And the reason that we chose to do it with something like Final Draft is because it has a collaborative element to it, so we can all make changes. And everybody will see the changes.
That's great.
And so that's nice in that we can,
if you want to accept it or not.
Correct.
The main thing is that when you're writing in a script format, like Final Draft or Movie Magic, and Fade In is the one I was thinking of, by the way. It actually was created by someone who writes in Hollywood. And what it does is that let's say you're talking and Kim's saying something, then we go to you and you're saying something, and then it goes to Jan, then it goes back to Kim, then to you, and it has a way of picking up as to who's probably going to speak next. So oftentimes it will suggest something that, and at first I was always amazed, like, how do they know I want that person to talk? But and that's the great thing, because it speeds up the process, the writing process for you, and it helps you. If it's you don't have to do interior and exterior, whereas Kim had to deal with the actual set, the setting where they were. But it's great in that way. It can help you with that. I understand, because yours is for dinner shows. Mm-hmm. You don't have to worry about the interior or exterior.
Right.
You're all interior. Exactly. But, you might think about that.
That's great. Thank you. Just
check it out. And I think Fade In's like $49. So, and I do really use that. I use all of them, but I like that one as well. The other thing is you also mentioned, and I want to talk about this, My Mind, My Friend.
Right.
Tell us about My Mind, My Friend.
I started writing when I got into my spiritual path. I started to write a book called My Mind, My Friend, about the conscious mind and how it doesn't have to work against us, and we don't have to work against it. That we can understand the way our conscious mind works, because the mind comes with the body the way cars come with air conditioning and radio, part of the human physical experience. And so I started writing a lot of what my experience was in learning how to balance my own thoughts with my subconscious thoughts, my conscious thoughts. And so I've never done anything with that book other than written it and saved it on my computer.
I know, but now we're going to get it published, right?
We're going to take you to that.
Apparently,
Yeah, I'm
that's
thinking
coming
he
up.
should be
Yes,
sending it to me for editing.
that just might have to happen.
All right. Now I'm curious about another thing. You interviewed Carol Burnett.
Yes,
Okay. And you did this in high school.
I did.
All right. And you just went up and said you're writing a thing for the school paper.
Actually, we were all invited to come and interview her. So there was one student from every newspaper at the high schools in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
That had the chance, and I was from my newspaper. I was brought in, and so we all got a chance to sit there with her and interview her and find out about her background and what made her tick and what her experiences were, and it was great.
Well, because we had Kate Blackwell on, and you know
I
Karen?
know Karen.
Oh yeah, and she was
Marty.
talking. Yeah. They were on our show two shows back.
We met on Royal Caribbean.
Oh, you did.
When I was doing one of our mysteries,
'Cause they
and
did
I wound
shows,
up
yeah.
singing backup for her and opened her show.
She's so great.
She's
We love
wonderful.
her.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, we
But
love her.
She
Yeah.
talked about Carol Burnett and how gracious Carol Burnett was
Very
with
much.
her.
Very
you
much.
know. So that's really nice to hear.
Yeah.
You know, it's wonderful to hear the good stories out of Hollywood. You know.
Yes.
It's true.
So, well, we're gonna have to talk more.
Okay.
You know, 'cause I know we know a lot of the same people.
Yeah.
So anyway, but when it comes to the script writing, are you going to plan on anything else? Has your sister dreamed anything else?
Oh, no, not yet. Oh, she actually, no, I take that back. She actually did, but it has to do with a more of a real life experience, but it was something like a relationship that she had in high school with a friend, a girlfriend. And so that is the next project.
Yeah, I'm going to recommend this. We actually had an author on who's written 50 books. And one of the things she does is she's very prolific about getting up in the morning and whatever came to her mind, writing it in and putting it down. I do that as well. And it's taken me a long time to learn to discipline myself to get these story ideas. And we just talked about this with Rihanna, who was on our show. Not Rihanna the singer. Rihanna Mellon, yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking about how important it is to get up and just write it down. You know, just if you can do something, and I recommend you do that. Make that exercise. If your sister's dreaming, she's got something there.
Right.
You know, tune into that. You
That
know,
is
that's
true.
an important thing. Because what you're going to find in the business is that when you write something, whether it's a novel or a script or whatever, you've got to have other projects ready to go. Because if
Right.
they like what you did, you know, you've got to be prepared to say, and I also have this, or I
Right.
have this.
That's a great
to follow
point.
up with. So whatever she's dreaming, have her write it down.
I will.
You know,
Well,
and
I'm curious. What is the genre of the dream that you're writing?
It is, without going into the exact subject matter, it is sci-fi romance.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
all right.
Is really the genre. Without having a specific genre, we would say that's the,
All right. When your sister wrote this and she told you that she was going to
Yes.
do this, what did you think?
I was on top of it 100% right away.
You didn't think, where did this come from?
No, not at all, because we're pretty open to that anyway.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I was right on it, and that's why I said, well, you know, I have questions, so you know, you're gonna have to come, you know, dream some more and come back to me with them, and it worked. So it was really funny. But I will tell you that one aspect of the subject matter is time travel.
Okay. We like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I just am curious with you, Jay. Have you thought about writing anything beyond the dinner show aspect? I know the book we talked about. But
Right. People keep asking me to do so, and I'm very much in touch with timing. And so when it's the right time, things are presented to me that way. And just like I had never thought I was going to write a murder mystery, and then my agent said, I want to do this. And then I heard myself say, okay, I'll write a mystery. So I believe there will be something that I will be doing at some time.
Yeah.
But I wanted to add something to your comment about writing down what we dream about. A lot of times we wake up and if we're up for too long, we don't remember. I've had the experience of being able to sit down and just the fact that you're actually connecting to handwriting and writing down, I don't remember my dream, and then the next thing out of me was, I'm walking down this hallway and there's doors to the right. So the minute you start writing, you click with your conscious mind or unconscious mind.
I always say write the first sentence. If you can write that first sentence, the rest will be easy.
Yes.
Exactly.
We had Gerard D. Marigny on our show couple shows back, and he actually talked about how he had the same thing happen to him. Someone came to him and said, I know this isn't your genre, but what do you think about writing this? And he liked the challenge. He said, it's not my forte, it's not my genre, but I like the challenge. And he does this now, he says all the time. He's never afraid now to step into a project. It's, all right, I'll take it on. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a great attitude
Absolutely.
to have. Yeah.
I'm sure I'm on Homeland Security's watch list because I Google, how could a person die from this?
Oh, yes. That's
I do
funny.
that too. Yeah. So, and so what's your next project? What are you working on?
Right now, we have Lowry's Prime Rib show, but we're going to be writing a new show, and I don't know why I never thought of this, because I performed on cruise ships and I've had a lot of years on them as a cruise director and assistant cruise director. Somebody said, you haven't written a mystery about a cruise ship yet?
I know.
So that's going to be the next one.
Yeah, with the Orient Express, we've had all these things about trains, planes. So why not?
And we're having a new train for Boulder City is going to be starting up.
No.
Yeah, and we've talked with them, with the Chamber of Commerce, and they're interested in having a mystery done on the train, taking them down to the museum. And so that'll be a new dinner show and train experience.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. That would be good. You ought to do something for the Mob Museum, too.
We actually have. We've done a few mysteries at the Mob Museum.
Marvelous.
Yeah.
I went to a murder mystery dinner. They're so much fun.
Well, maybe he wrote it.
I'm sure he probably did. And this was back in 1987-ish.
Oh, it could be. Could be.
Yeah.
It's like a live game of Clue. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That sounds really fun.
Yeah.
So do you have any questions for us when it comes to writing?
Well, I understand that your main genre is sci-fi, is that correct? Or?
I write in all different genres. I write in science fiction. My first novel was a government espionage. And then I also write children's stories. So, and then I have dramatic pieces. I would have to say most of what I've written has not been published. My first book that came out was The Emblem in 1995. It was a government espionage. And then I had a book that came out in 2005. Didn't go over too well. And it was probably because of the title. And both of you are into spirituality, so you may agree that it was called Creating God. So a lot of people felt that was sacrilegious. So I took it off the shelf. It went back. It was revamped a little bit. It is a science fiction novel, and it's called The Alien Transcripts. And it's actually the next thing that's supposed to be coming out here real soon.
That's
I've been
That's
working on
great.
getting it out. And it really is kind of spiritual in a way, but it talks about who we are, where we came from, and why. And I think part of what we're talking about is let the imagination go, let your sister do her dreams. Sometimes my work comes from a sleep mode. A lot of what I write comes from that. But I also, without even realizing it, sometimes pay attention to what's going on in real life. And this story, The Alien Transcripts, even though it's science fiction, actually came from a National Geographic show that I was watching.
Oh, wow.
And what I did, and it was questions. It was the what ifs. And the question was, as I was watching this documentary, it was showing the primates from a rainforest that was being destroyed in one part of the world, and then it would show the city that was being built and destroying it, and they would show the primates and then the people of those cities. And I started noticing there was a similarity in not only in the way that they had facial features, but also in their mannerisms. Then they would move to another part of the world, and they showed how that rainforest was being depleted and the cities that were being built around it. And I started noting they had similarities. Then they even talked about the rainforest of Europe that had been destroyed, that are no longer in existence, and how those primates. And then when they showed those pictures, I thought, they have similarities to the people of their... So I thought, well, okay, so maybe this might prove Darwin's theory of evolution. But if that's true, then what about creationism? If you believe in God, you wouldn't believe in Darwinism. And I had a very good friend of mine who wrote a book called My Journey with the Truth, and I actually helped translate that from one language into English. And he was a theologian, and I thought, he wanted to read what I was writing. So I thought, okay, I'll let him read it and see what he thinks. And I thought, he's going to think this is sacrilegious, because I actually talk about how we were created. And in my book, I allude to the fact that we were created by another species, an alien species. And they were the god of the mythologies. And they were the ones who gave us our languages, our religions, and so forth and so on. So anyway, I thought, he's going to come back to me, and he's going to say this is sacrilegious, because he's a devout Maronite. And a Maronite Christian during the Middle East, a lot of people don't even know who they are, but they have a church in almost every major city in the United States. They're a division of the Catholic Church. And he's a very big believer in Jesus Christ as God on earth. And I thought, oh, no, this is not going to work. He came back to me and he says, James, you have to put this book out there. You'll never change my faith. And I think this is important for people to understand. You'll never change my faith. I do believe God is Jesus Christ on earth. However, everybody's looking for an answer. It doesn't change my way of viewing or the way I see faith, but it gives us answers. It's a possibility. And that's what writing is all about. It's a way to escape. And, to what if this could have happened? Doesn't mean it did. It just means what if. Because remember, it's science fiction. So that's where my encouragement came to put that book out there. Unfortunately, the title did its demise in the beginning. So we're going to put it back out there. It's pretty much the same story. It's more up to date. And it does deal a lot with spirituality, with what is the spirit of man, what is the soul of man. I won't go into a lot of details because I want people to read the book.
Sure.
But, it really does. It's not what people think. It is not blasphemy at all. In fact, it's probably just the opposite, because in my story, these higher beings believe in something greater than themselves.
Right.
Right.
So, and I know you both can relate to this, because we're at a conference that deals with spirituality.
That deals with all of these subjects.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I was going to ask you, what is your process as you're writing? And you answered part of it. But when you're actually writing, are you coming from a conscious place with it, or do you feel that it's coming through you as well?
Both. Because consciously, I paid attention to what was going on the screen when I was watching that documentary. However, when you start the writing process, that's where, like what your sister did, takes over. Because, and this still happens every single night for me, when I lay down, if I'm working on something, I will try and figure out what direction to go in with that project. I think if you're really a writer who you allow yourself to examine every avenue out there possible, and you don't stifle yourself with saying I have to do it this way.
Right.
Because when I'm writing something, for instance, I'll give you an example. I had a character who, I've talked about this numerous times, but this is a good example. I had a character who was going with someone who was going on with his fiancée to propose to her. Well, she wasn't his fiancée. He was going to propose to her. And this was a buddy of his. This is my first novel. This is a buddy of his who's with him in the Secret Service. But it didn't make sense that he was tagging along with them, because he was going to propose to his fiancée. So why would he drag this buddy with him to their cabin in Savannah, Georgia? And then I thought, well, what if I have him married off? Because if he's already married, it would make sense they could invite them, because they could be doing their own thing while he's got this nice, quiet thing. And that's what I did. So I had to go back and change the whole story from the beginning to the end, because in the beginning he wasn't married. So that's where consciously you let the characters drive you.
Sure.
However, if I'm stuck on something and I'm mailing it over, then sometimes when I'm asleep, I somehow work that out in my mind while I'm sleeping. The subconscious takes over and says, this is what you need to do. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, because sometimes I'll sit down to write a story and I have a conceptual idea of what I want to do. Then as I start writing, it starts changing. And then I've done that as well, where I've changed it. By the time I'm finished, it's completely different than what I thought my intention was in sitting down.
I heard a really famous author just about a month or so ago make the comment that he doesn't allow his characters to drive or steer him.
Right.
He drives the story. And he's very, very successful. This man sold probably 100 million copies. But the point is that doesn't work for everyone. And it's great that it's worked for him, but I don't think he should say that that's how everyone should write, because you really have to write for whatever works for you, and find that.
Yeah, my characters write their own parts.
Yeah.
They live their own lives.
Well,
I can't set it for them.
right. They're like characters. They're real life characters. When I was selling my first book, when I would go to signings and whatever, if I was trying to get someone to come to an event, I would start telling them this story. And because it is government espionage and events since then have happened, even though they hadn't at that time, people thought I was talking about real people. And they go, how did you know these people? How did you know to write about them? And then I forget that I'm telling them this, like I actually know these people, that they really do exist. And I think that's what happens when you allow the character to take over, because they do become real to you.
Yeah.
And they do have their own personalities, and they do steer you. I mean, literally, I could create a character that is just as real as you in my mind, or you, Jay, or Kim. And they are real to me. They steer me as to what they're going to do next.
Yeah.
And I like reading books like that too.
Yeah.
Where I become so engrossed in the character that I'm so sad
Yes.
when the book ends, because they were my friend.
Yeah.
And they became somebody that I enjoyed visiting every night.
And you wanna
until
know
the
what they're
book was
gonna do
over.
next.
Exactly.
Yeah.
First time I ever went to see my book on a store in Atlanta, Georgia. I lived in Atlanta when the book came out. I got into a chain of bookstores there. I walk into a store. I was so anxious to see that book on the shelves. I go into the store. I asked the lady at the counter, if they had the emblem. And she said, yes, we have. I said, because I was looking for it. I said, I was looking for it on the shelf and I couldn't find it. I knew it had to be there. And she said, yes, we do have it. It's over here in the true sections. And I said, why is it over there? Because I'm the author. And she said, well, it's a true story. And I said, why do you think it's a true story? She said, well, I read it. It's a true story. I said, no. And she's trying to convince me that it's a true story. And I thought, what, I'm just going to let her think that. I'm not going to say, as long as she directs people to where the book is on the shelf, that's all I care about.
Right.
So,
That's funny.
yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's success.
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody's thinking that it's real.
Real.
Yeah. So that was fun. So.
And I know what you mean about authors that make you that you connect with the characters and you feel like they're your friends.
Yes.
Sidney Sheldon did that in his Midnight books, and Armistead Maupin are two authors that write like that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of times when someone has as a series with the same character, then that's what they're doing. They're taking that character, they're letting that character tell them what the next story is going to be.
Exactly.
And
they take on a life of their own as they continue.
Absolutely. I read the entire series of the Lillian Jackson Braun Cat Who books. And I'm talking, she must have had 16 of them. But I became so engrossed in those characters that I just could not stop reading them. And I think she finally died. She was in her 90s, but she was still writing when she was in her 90s.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're really fun books, and also they're murder mysteries. Each one of them, and this little town has a murder every single book. It's
that's like Murder, She Wrote.
Yeah, it's kind of like Murder, She Wrote.
Like,
exactly.
Boy, half the population's
dead
by
funny.
now.
Oh my, that's so funny.
One of the things I was thinking about too, what your sister does is kind of neat because, and I wish I had someone to do the same thing. You can create all these stories, but then having the time to write them is the hard part.
Right.
And that's great because I know you've heard of Barbara Cartland.
I don't know if I have you.
I have.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's a romance writer.
Okay.
Related to the Queen, I think. She was her sister,
okay,
right?
yes.
And she wrote like 300 novels.
I know
or something
exactly
in
who it
her
is.
lifetime.
I did not know she was related to the Queen.
Yeah,
I didn't know that
but
either.
what she would do is she actually, and I think there's other authors, famous authors, who have done this as well. She didn't actually write the whole book. She had the concept, and she would sit down and dictate to someone what she wanted, and then they would help create the story.
I see.
So that is a way of writing.
Sure.
I mean, it's still your imagination. It's just someone else is helping you formulate.
Right.
And that's what I try to tell people who are wanting to write, who think I can't do this. I don't have journalistic background. I don't understand the English language at all, like me.
Yeah.
But you can, if you really want to do it, you can. There was a lady named Mrs. Tucker who wrote a book. I took some seminars at Emory University on writing. And one of the ladies who hosted that seminar said, when I wrote my first book, I wrote it freehand in a spiral notebook. And I thought I had something great. My husband wouldn't read it. So then she hands it off to a friend. She could get anyone to read it. She had this one friend who's also an author. And she gave it to her husband to read. She was doing something else, working on it, and her husband said, I can't get through this. This is a mess. So then she said, okay, I'm going to force myself to sit down and read this. Now, keep in mind, it wasn't just that it was handwritten in a spiral notebook. Syntax wasn't what it should be. Punctuation wasn't what it should be. So, but she forced herself to read it, and she said, oh, my God, this is a great story. She happened to have a relative in New York who worked for, I think it was Doubleday. So she sent that off, and I guess she typed it up and sent it off. They have editors, just like where you are.
Yeah.
And they edited that story. Not only did it become, one book was called Sudi and then one was called Alice. Not only did it become bestsellers, they were both made into Lifetime movies. Wow. So that's why I say never let someone tell you can't write. You can. If your imagination's there and if your willpower's there and you're ambitious enough, you'll find a way to get that book out there.
That's
yeah. If you have a story, and everybody has a story.
Yes.
Everybody.
Yes.
All you got to do is just write that first sentence and then let it go.
And we also talked about this with Maureen when she was on the show, and how that you don't really think of necessarily when you're writing it how many you're going to sell. You may later on, but initially you're not.
Right.
You're just thinking, I'm doing it for this reason, or I need it for this seminar, or whatever you're doing. And I think a lot of writers need to understand, don't think about how you're going to get it published, or how many copies you're going to sell, or how much money you'll make. Just write it, because the rest will happen if it's supposed to.
Right.
The main thing is to just get the story on paper and get it out there. People don't know this. I mean, a lot of people from our show know this, but like I know Kim doesn't know this and Jay doesn't know this. But Jan came on the show as a first-time author. She had not been published.
Right.
She did not have the book edited at all. And I have a friend who was on my very first show, John Long. And John said, I have a friend who's written this book, but she doesn't know what to do with it. She doesn't know where to go. So I met up with Jan, and I said, you know what? I would like to use you as an experiment on our show. We're going to do what's called Jan's Corner. And
That's how I
each
got
week,
started.
we're going to get started, and first thing is we're going to do the editing process. So we got her an editor.
Yep.
Had it all edited for her. Went through that process. Every week
Oh,
we would meet up and
great.
see where we were. Had the editor on the phone with us, who also became a co-host
Became a
when we were on
co-host,
KLAV.
Oh, how
Yeah.
great.
Dana Michelli.
Yeah, Dana Michelli, which is with Writers in the Sky. And so then Jan went through that whole process. Then we went through the process of, okay, how are we going to mark this? Then we got our PR person,
Yeah.
Travis Short.
Yeah.
And all this was done on the air.
Yes.
How
that's amazing.
And now she's a
fantastic.
co-host on the show.
And
Yeah.
so what is the name of your book?
It's called The Secrets of Time.
Oh.
And the second one is The Secrets of Time, Treasures of the Heart.
And you're working on the third one.
And I'm working on the third one
That is
now.
fantastic. Same characters?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
a-
that's so
kind of
great.
a trilogy. Yeah.
And where can
Oh,
we
great.
find your books?
Barnes and Noble.
Barnes and Noble, Amazon?
Amazon.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kindle.
So
Nice.
that's what this show is about. It's out, you don't know where you're going to go next. Maureen talked about growing up in the country on the farm.
Right.
I did too. So, you as kids, we can dream these things. You can dream, I'm going to be a great actor, I'm going to be that. And it's like you were talking about, you didn't know you were going to write.
No.
You
Not
had
at
no
all.
clue that's what you really wanted to do. And certainly you didn't
Not
know
at all.
screenplay.
No.
So
No.
that's why you just let it go. Just let
Right.
it happen. And I'm sure that if you continue with your sister
Mm-hmm.
and you keep going with the screenplay, especially, you got to understand you already have a connection if you have a
We
script
do.
doctor.
Yes.
So
We're pretty. We've got a good chunk of it done. It's just, and he's also a good outlet in terms of he has an agent,
Uh-huh.
and so he is able. He's got a lot of connections.
Uh-huh.
So that's really why we did it in the first place.
and the fact that he's helping you with it.
Oh my gosh, it's invaluable.
Yeah.
Invaluable. We
Yeah.
couldn't. We don't have that expertise because unfortunately, I guess, there are some formulas that Hollywood likes in
Right.
terms of screenplays,
Right.
and so we didn't know that. And he does. And so he's like, well, this is what they look for. This is what's going to get you looked at. You can't just go in with your script and expect somebody to look at it. You have to have an agent. You have to,
Right.
there's certain things that have to be like certain protocol. And so that's, he's a wonderful resource, and we couldn't be happier.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when I first went out there, it was different when I started, because I did start early. I mean, you started writing, though, in 1985, and I started writing in 1995. All the differences is that I had to publish my work,
Right.
so that was a little bit different. And even, people don't know this, but before I ever published my first book, I was pushing a screenplay. The whole reason the novel was written is because of what we've actually talked to a couple of our guests about, how they did the same thing. It's hard to go out there and go to Hollywood and say, here's my work.
Right.
Yeah. So it's much easier if you have a book that you can present first,
Sure.
and then it's easier to submit the
very true.
screenplay to get their attention. I want to bring up a couple things that you guys remind me of. When Gerard Demergy was on the show, one of the other things he did is, I love this guy because he was so great about his stories. He started off he was in a band, like a major rock band. They did quite well. He toured with them in the world and everything. Then he went into finance, and he made money in finance, but he was not happy with what he was doing, and he wanted to be a writer. And he was telling a story about his wife said, what, we have enough to live on. Just pursue your passion. We don't need extravagance. So just go out there and pursue it. And when he started out, he would write people and tell them, I don't know I can't remember who he said now, but he would write different people and say, I know how you write. I can write this story for you. And then they'd send back, who are you? We don't know you. And he said he did that a couple of times.
Yeah, but he never let any of it discourage
No.
him, no matter how many rejections he got.
Yeah. And
That's
then
great.
he wrote a book that deals with 9/11 and terrorism, and then he published it, self-published it, and then nothing was happening with it for months, and then he woke up one morning after the anniversary of 9/11, and he was number one in 3 countries, selling about 8,200 books an hour.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how these people kind of didn't, Anyway, the thing is that he learned that let your mind go wherever it should. Don't be afraid to take chances and just keep writing. And he's now working on the remake of Grizzly Adams.
Wow.
He's one of the
Oh,
writers
gosh.
for that. They're getting ready to put that out there. And he has a couple more projects down the road that are also. So that's why, we often fear what we don't know.
Right.
And we're so afraid to take the next step and move forward. And I'm learning still to this day. It's still hard for me to write some people and say, will you be on the show, or would you do this? But, it's amazing if you just go out there and ask how many people say, okay.
You never know unless
Yeah.
you try.
Yeah, I think it's about vulnerability too. It's
Yeah.
like putting yourself out there and being judged and being rejected.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I went through that with the novels. When I first started out, when I pushed the script first and I wrote the book, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to self-publish. I'm not even going to deal with but then self-publishing back then was very difficult. And it was difficult to get your books in the stores. You couldn't, it was just really hard self-publishing in 1995. So I thought, okay, I'm doing everything backwards. Now I'm going to send out the query letters and see if I can get a major publisher. Well, the big mistake I made is back then, if you'd already self-published, they weren't interested in you at all.
Right.
Nowadays, if you self-publish and you're successful, oftentimes they'll buy you.
Sure.
So that's completely reversed. But the interesting thing is I must have gotten, I did it to myself, but I probably got 100 or 200 rejection letters because I was always sending them out. And it was very discouraging. And I had to learn to get past that because it's really easy to give up
Sure.
and say, I'm not going to continue to do this. It's much harder to just, I don't care.
Persevere.
I failed, but I'm going to do it anyway. So,
Persevere.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm sure we've
and
all
that's
been
what you
through
have
this.
to do.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
all.
After numerous rejection letters, that's when I got a hold of John Long and said, I want this book published. What do I do?
Yeah.
Because I'm getting nothing but rejection letters. And it would be strange things because I would send it off to a women's fiction publisher, and I get a notice back 6-8 weeks later, we're not doing that genre. But that's what you do.
Yeah.
That's what your
Right,
company
they tell you
is.
to research to find out to make sure it's the genre for the
Right.
the company you're sending it to. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
When you wrote your work,
Yes.
Jay, I have a short memory. Because yours is different, you didn't have to send it out to anyone. So how
I didn't, but when I went to put it into script format to send it out to a publishing house for people that wanted to rent scripts for either shows or for parties, I did send it to them, and we did get a rejection notice from them that it's so specialized that it wouldn't work for what they do.
Okay.
But as a performer, I've gone through the same type of rejection that you guys have, just in going to auditions and not getting roles. So my first experience in writing and rejection would have been with this publishing house.
I think sometimes it's probably easier for someone who's been an actor to write because they're used to the rejections.
In a way, yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because you can't get every part you go and audition for.
Yeah.
So, in some ways, that'd make you a great writer.
You definitely are writing from your experience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the other stories, the opposite end of the spectrum, where people who've written, who on a whim, who've gone out there and they wrote something and it just takes off, and they didn't expect it either, and they're a phenomenon. So there is that end of the spectrum too. It's very rare, but it happens. There are authors out there who also have what's called slush piles, because the traditional publishers get so many queries, and you can do it internet now. You can submit all your queries online.
Right.
And so because they get probably thousands a day, not just hundreds, they'll do what's called a slush pile. They'll just have their picks of, they're going to just go in there and pick certain emails and see if maybe that fits what they want to do. And you can get lucky that way, because I believe that's what the lady who wrote Twilight, that's what she said happened with her, that they just happened to pick her from the slush pile. And so it's a different industry today, and there's over 300 authors published a day. And so you think about the competition out there. It's really hard to get a notice. And in Hollywood, I'm sure it's the same way. They probably get hundreds of scripts every day.
Well, and that's why it's important to have somebody know the ropes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and knowing how to pitch it.
Yeah. So do you think that it's, when you're starting the writing process, do you think it's more advantageous to write to be published, or write for yourself? And
it's right for yourself.
Right for yourself.
My advice. Everyone's take on it's different. But we've talked about your connection, and that's really cool and neat.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with thinking about it.
Right. And because I have a couple other ideas in my head in terms of just a regular novel types too. Well, one would be more, I could probably do both of them fiction, but there'd be semi-autobiographical. So my question was, do I just write it because it will please me, and then therefore...
Well, I do think you have to write to please yourself. You have to make sure that it's something you're happy with. There are formulas to use. We talked about that in a couple shows where, you do have certain things you may want in the story to make it interesting. Just like you were told about writing for Hollywood with the script doctor that you used, he basically said you need this to get their attention.
Yes.
But at the same time, you're writing the story. To me, I think you should write the story that pleases you, that you really enjoyed it. And then when you read it again, because keep in mind, when you go to edit, you're going to be reading it over and over and over again. I am editing the book that's getting ready to come out, and I still... Even though I'll write the next chapter, I find that even though I should be moving on to the next chapter and finish it, because it's been edited, I'm just refining it. Instead of going to the next chapter, to this day, I still go all the way back to the beginning and read it all the way through to the chapter that I just finished. Maybe that's why it's taken me so long. But every time I find something.
Of course.
Yeah.
But for each version of that book, or each version of each edit, you've got an audience that is ready to see that and will be attracted to that version.
Yes.
Yeah. When you wrote yours, I'm just curious, why did you choose dinner theater? Just curious.
Actually, I didn't choose dinner theater, and the first mystery was not dinner. It was just a party. It's just a private party.
A private party.
And we have various formats. We have reception format. We have, on the ships, we were doing a game show format, so it was 30 minutes. It was just like that. So we have the full dinner into just reception or just game show.
So did you go out there and push the idea of being a dinner show to the wherever where all have you had your shows?
We've been at Lowry's for the past 12 years,
okay.
And that's the only public venue that we really do full time. We are at Firelight Barn in Henderson right now, and that's a dinner show because it is a full theater as well. Mm-hmm. Private parties, we are just available however they want to do it. We show up where the client wants us, and we do it in the format that they want. So for corporates, when we do corporate and team building, again, it can be in their office, it can be in a meeting room or a ballroom in Vegas where they want us, or at a hotel.
So how did you go out there and suggest this to someone?
Actually, from the time we started in Los Angeles, we were just doing the private parties. Then we started doing fundraisers, and it really became word of mouth. And then when I decided to take it to the next level, we started doing dinner cruises in California and then in Pennsylvania. And then for corporates, I just told people, this is what I'm doing now, and people started to suggest us, and it became word of mouth. And then the website was born, and then we just continued. We don't advertise per se because we don't have a weekly show someplace. So for the corporates, we created YouTube videos and reviews and et cetera. And it's, again, just all the internet and word of mouth.
That's amazing.
That is.
Yeah. Because we're at an event, and we talk about how important that is, that the events or seminars are a great way to get your work out there. We know someone who actually created a site for authors. It's not going on right now. He's going to bring it back next year or something. But he actually created. It's a site where you can go and post your book, and you can either pre-sell the book or you can raise money to help support your book for the editing or whatever.
Crowdfunding.
Yeah, I like crowdfunding.
Yeah.
Author.com.
Is author.com.
Yeah.
But we need to let the listeners know it's not there right now.
Sure.
He because it's a new company, there were some things he has to tweak with it, so he's bringing it back, I guess, next year. But the thing is that the reason he started that is because as a self-publisher, and he did business seminars. He's a businessman, an entrepreneur. So he wrote his own books, but it was hard to get a publisher to take them on. So he thought, well, I'll just self-publish these. And I guess he wrote numerous books now, and he did quite well selling them at seminars before he ever went to the internet with them. And we're talking about thousands. And so that's when he thought, you know what, this has been hard for me. And that's when he created author.com, was a way of helping people get them out there.
That's a great idea.
That is a really great idea. Why did he stop?
Well, he's still doing it. I mean, he's still an entrepreneur. He still does businesses, but he stopped the crowdfunding end of it because they needed to retweak it. You know more than I do, Jan, about that.
Yeah, I think what it is he's moved on to a different thing that he's doing now, and I think he's more into taking already published books and going further with them.
I see.
And those authors, and not worrying about
the crowdfunding end
Got it.
Yeah, because you do have a lot of different avenues out there for crowdfunding now. And it's kind of like we had Amanda Skindora on our show, and she talked about how she does grant writing. But we talked about crowdfunding and how sometimes with crowdfunding now, there's so many platforms out there, everybody's jumping on the bandwagon. So you get that reputation of, there's another crowdfunding site. You know, I actually recommend that. We did that for Jan.
Yeah.
We've done that for almost every author I've dealt with. I've always had them go, we had one author who raised more than she needed.
Wow.
So, it is still a good avenue. The difference with something like that, though, it's really not a bad thing for what, well, I don't know if you need crowdfunding now, Jay, but, it's really not a bad way to get word. I always tell people I used it as a platform for getting it in people's hands and knowing about it, as opposed to necessarily crowdfunding.
Right.
Because when you put it out there, you encourage your family and friends to go out there and get it's pre-sales is really what it is, because they're getting a copy of your book for basically what they'd pay in the store.
Right.
And we always create an event with it.
Yeah.
We don't just do crowdfunding to where you get the book and it's sent to you. We always created incentives to where, we had a book launching.
Yeah.
So you pick your book up at the book launching if you're
great.
local. And then that brings people in for a cocktail hour to where they get to meet other people and talk. And usually they bring friends who are going to buy your book at that event.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like an event. It's another way of selling that I actually like it.
Yeah.
We're doing something different at our next mystery. Is we have an author who is a mystery novelist, and he's coming to the event, and we're going to introduce him as one of our town folk who just wrote a book, and he's going to get a chance to talk about it, and he'll be on site at the event.
So who's that
that would be
author?
cool.
Stephen Murray.
Oh, very cool. We know Steve.
Okay.
Yes. Stephen's been on our show several times.
You'll have to go to the event.
If you go to our website, Aspects of Writing, you'll see
right.
his little picture there and
Yep.
his
Yeah.
books.
Very
Okay.
clever.
Yeah.
Very clever.
Yeah.
Yeah. We always say this is a small world
Yes.
because we had a guest on, Brian Ruff, who's a local, he's a publisher, but he's also an author. And I usually find fun facts and quotes. We didn't do that here because you guys came from the event that we're attending here at Alexis
Right.
Park. But I went on the internet, found this funny quote. I always like to start. Now, keep in mind, this can be from anyone, anywhere in the world, as long as they wrote something that has to do with writing. So then I wrote this into the script. We get to the studio. I always send the script out in advance, usually for the authors to have, so they know what we're going to do and what they have to read. And when Brian came in, he was telling me, he said, I know that person. We didn't really talk too much about it before we went on air.
Right.
And as it turned out, he knew that person. He's friends with that person. Now, this was a quote I could have given to Jan, myself, or the other guest who was on.
Yeah.
That person lived 5 minutes within walking distance to the studio.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
And
We
he's
didn't
the one who
know.
ended up being on our show
And we didn't know.
later.
And I didn't know
Who was
Stephen
that?
before. He had come to an event we were at, and he was there at the Firelight Barn with his book. And after that, he said, I understand you're doing the next show. Would you be interested in having me there?
Well, actually, the thing about Gerard is that I didn't know that Brian knew him because I had booked people in advance. I thought, I like this guy, I'm going to write him. He said he would be on the show. I thought he was in another state. And he was
How
already scheduled
funny.
to be on the show before Brian was ever on the show.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
amazing.
It
I
was-
love when stuff like that
You know,
happens.
this hour has gone so quick.
Oh, it really
It
has.
always
Really
does.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I appreciate you both. This is the last minute.
Oh,
People
thank
don't
you for having
understand.
us.
This is a last minute show. You
Yeah.
literally just came up within the last hour. And I appreciate you both. And
Thank
that's
you so
Thank
much.
you.
And
Jay
it was a
Joseph.
pleasure meeting
Oh,
you.
you're welcome. And Kim Barron. And
Thank
hopefully
you.
we're going to hear a lot about Kim
Oh.
Barron in the
Oh, yes.
future.
Thank
Yes.
you.
And Jay, just let us know if you want to come back and
We'd
talk
love
about
to.
what you've done.
Sure.
We'll definitely
Thank
do
you.
that for you, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Jan, thank you again. for the
Thank
show.
you.
Oh, yeah.
And if
Always
anyone's
a-
interested, you can go to Aspects of Writing, aspectsofwriting.com. And when the show gets ready to air, we'll have your pictures up there and tell a little bit about you. And so, just go to aspectsofwriting.com. And this show will air live on AMFM
24/7.
Yeah, AMFM247.com out of Florida, and then it'll be on the internet, and then we'll be on
Nice.
iTunes, iHeart,
Wow.
so you'll be able to listen to it all these
Great.
different things.
Yeah. And YouTube.
And YouTube, yeah, and then Roku. So just go to aspectsofwriting.com and scroll down about halfway. There's a part that says terrestrial stations. It lists all of our terrestrial stations, and then there's links on there for all the other aspects like iHeart, iTunes, Roku,
Okay.
Spreaker, all the different places you can go and listen to the show.
Great.
All
Well,
right.
thanks so much
Thank
for
you
having us.
so much for
being on
having
the
us.
show. Thank you. And we want to say thank you again to Alexis Park
Alexis
for
Park.
letting us use it.
Yes.
All Suite Hotel. We have a little ad on our website on Aspects of Writing. Just go down there and click into Alexis Park in Las Vegas, Nevada, and you'll learn more about their All Suite Hotel.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.